Stavros Ioannidis. I'm a news editor for Skai Media Group and CNN Greece. And in the next 45 minutes, we will discuss a very important issue, the impact of the normalization of relations between Serbia and Kosovo in the context of the European integration of the Western Balkans. I think 45 minutes is not enough time to address such an important issue, but I hope we will reach fruitful conclusions and probably gain some perspective on this matter. So, I would like to present the esteemed speakers who are standing by me, Mr. Miroslav Lajčák, the European Union Special Representative for the Western Balkans and the Belgrade-Pristina dialogue, Mr. Martin McDowell, Office of South Central European Affairs from the US Department of State, Lord Stuart, Prime Minister's Special Envoy to the Western Balkans from the United Kingdom, and of course, Mr. Thanos Dokos, National Security Advisor of the Greek Prime Minister. So, I will get to the point. Mr. Lajčák, I would like to start with you. It's been almost a month since the two parties, Serbia and Kosovo, reached an agreement, the Ohrid Agreement. My question is, do you believe that the Ohrid Agreement is the key for the normalization of relations between the two countries and, moreover, of course, for the integration in the European Union?
First of all, thank you very much for having me and for having this issue on the agenda of Delphi Economic Forum. 2023 is the year when we commemorate 20 years since the historical Thessaloniki summit. And I think our predecessors 20 years ago have envisaged a different picture of the Western Balkans 20 years later. Unfortunately, wherever we look in the region, we see many challenges. And out of all these challenges, I consider the unregulated relationship between Serbia and Kosovo the most strategic challenge because it really impacts the entire region. The atmosphere, but also the cooperation, or better to say, lack of proper cooperation. So, and also, there are ethnic Serbs and ethnic Albanians living in every corner of the Balkans, and therefore, this relationship goes way beyond the bilateral dimension. We have been through different stages of this process. Second half of last year, the key word was crisis management. We had 6 serious crises which we had to deal with, and of course you cannot even dream about normalization when you are busy with the diffusing crises or removing the barricades. And that's why we came up with a proposal, with a plan, how to change the dynamics and to get us from this negative and crisis trajectory to a forward-looking and positive one. And yes, we put this plan together, got strong support from some member states and full support from the EU member states, and then we replaced the keyword crisis management with the keyword negotiations. We were talking to both parties, Serbia and Kosovo, about the importance of accepting this plan. And finally, yes, at a meeting on February 27 in Brussels, the parties adopted this plan, and then 18th of March in Ohrid, they also agreed on the implementation annex. So now we have a plan. Now we have relations based on a different quality. These two documents, the agreement and the annex, are legally binding. They are official. They were announced through the High Representative Borrell's statement. So we have the path towards normalization. And now the key word should be implementation. This is so important that we put the implementation of this agreement as the utmost priority for everyone. Because, as I just said, we have a path toward normalization, but unfortunately we also have many landmines alongside that path. There are issues that can derail the process. We can easily get into another crisis if one or the other issues such as license plates or energy or expropriation of the land, of course the security vacuum in the north. So right now the most important message for everyone is focus on the implementation, use the dialogue, and avoid any unilateral activities that have the capacity to derail the process. And we still have to deal with these unilateral activities on a daily basis. As we speak, there is tension in Mitrovica now about the request to open the bridge when the atmosphere is clearly not ripe for that. And it's again without the participation of the population affected. So that's why I also want to use this panel to send a message. This is the right platform. We believe this is the best plan. This is the best plan at this moment. This is the maximum achievable. At the same time, it's a win-win plan. It delivers to both parties a lot while respecting their red lines. And implementation of this plan will bring stability. It will unlock 4 freedoms for the region and will mean establishing of normals in the region. So that's our best hope. That's our best plan.
Thank you very much. Mr. McDowell, from the US perspective, how likely is that the 2 parties will implement the agreement and stay true to their part of the agreement?
Well, first of all, also thank you for inviting us, and glad to be here. It's a wonderful event. It's been really interesting panels so far, and I hope this discussion also lives up to that reputation. But to answer your question, I mean, it's not a question of likelihood. This is the only path at this time. And it's up to the parties, I think, as the Special Representative just said, to take their individual actions, uphold their commitments that they agreed to at Ohrid. This is about the next generation of the region, and not just in Serbia and Kosovo, but across the Western Balkans, where the same vulnerabilities that unfortunately Russia is currently exploiting in Ukraine, in Moldova, in Belarus, exist in Europe's inner courtyard, as a colleague recently described the region at another event. So we're looking for this agreement and the annex to be implemented as quickly as possible so we can unlock a more prosperous, more stable possibilities in the future for the entire region.
Thank you, Lord Pitts. Should the EU accelerate the process, speed up the process of the integration of the Western Balkans in regards to the Russian aggression and security issues for the continent, for Europe?
Well, thank you again. Thank you to the Delphi Forum and the Greek government for their support for this excellent opportunity. And of course, in the middle of the war, or we don't know whether it's the middle of the war, illegal war that Putin has launched against Ukraine, the notion, the idea, the thought that this does not spill over in some ways into the region is wrong. Russian influence is real. It is an attempt to destabilize, to knock every process. We, as the UK government, strongly support both Mr. Lajčák's role and indeed the detail that he's set out so clearly. And I would also add that and it's not just a word, this is the Euro-Atlantic journey for the people of the region. It embraces the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and of course, it leads to a better future for all the citizens. And we have missions still in place. And as a former military man, I am sad that 25 years after wars, we still have those missions. And they are there to provide a safe and secure environment and reassure the people. They are necessary because of the world we're in. So there is, in my view and in my voice, there's an urgency to the EU facilitated process, not just for normalization, but for reconciliation from those wars of the 90s. It is not the 1990s, it's 2023, and we've spoken all week here about what that means to a troubled world. The UK completely supports this process. Why? Because it's the right thing to do, and now is the right time to do it. And we need to get on with it. I think the EU is showing remarkable focus, concentration, and urgency. And I also urge all sides not to make any excuses now, not to continue a positive dialogue to reach that process of normalization, which in itself, as Miroslav made clear, will help reconciliation to begin across the region. And why do we do this? It's simply because to give that hope for the next generation, so that they stay in their countries. The wonderful, talented young people we all meet when we visit the region stay there to make a better future. Simple message.
Thank you. Mr. Dokos, what are the priorities of the Greek government in the region?
I would also like to thank for the invitation, and since you asked Lord Pitch about enlargement, I should say that the EU is open to applications from countries that are having second thoughts about their decisions. I would like to take a step back and answer and say the obvious, but sometimes the obvious should be said. Even if it wasn't for Ukraine, we have difficult neighborhoods, both in the east and in the south, and having a gray zone in Europe's soft underbelly has been a problem for many years. And especially Kosovo has been a black hole inside this gray zone. So for Greece, for obvious geographic, but also political and economic reasons, it's very important to complete this process. Greece is deeply invested into the enlargement process for the Western Balkans, and we're trying to keep the 2003 Thessaloniki spirit as much as alive as we can. Now, we are one of the countries that has not recognized Kosovo's independence for a number of reasons, but at the same time, we have developed very good relations with Kosovo, short of independence. And we think this is the best contribution we can make in solving or assisting the two countries to reach a mutually acceptable solution. We're not there, and I think both sides need to fulfill their commitments. There are steps that need to be taken, promises and commitments that need to be respected and fulfilled. We are not part of the Quint, but being a Balkan country, we are always ready to make a contribution if we can.
Thank you. Mr. Lajčák, back to you. What, in your mind, is the biggest obstacle in the implementation of the Ohrid Agreement? Would it be probably the association of the Serb municipalities? This is a matter since 2013. It's still unsolved.
Let me start with the positive elements in this process. And here I want to mention unprecedented level of unity among the EU member states, fully behind this process. And also extremely close cooperation and support we get from the United States and also from the United Kingdom. And this has a huge impact on the actors on the ground because they see we are serious, they see we are united, and we all believe this is the best process. Obstacles, there are many. Too much past still present in daily lives. People still confronted with the past, and unfortunately in the Balkans the habit to see only that part of the past which works well for you, where you look good, and trying not to see the parts where you caused harm on the others, so that this is not helpful. And we need to come to the point when everybody will turn towards the future rather than be mentally caught in the past. Second, very low level of trust between the parties, between the Serbs and the Albanians. And of course, it's very difficult to make deals when you don't trust your partner. So we are trying to make this process measurable and give guarantees that if you do what you are asked to do, you will also get what you are promised to get, so that there is no risk that you do your part and then you will be left without getting the benefits. The association you mentioned is an issue that needs to be addressed because it's a long-standing legal commitment, legal obligation, but it's a technical issue, I would say, compared to the fact which I said, that the prejudices, the memories, a long shadow of the past, and very low trust. When it comes to the association, it looked, it was agreed 10 years ago. There was no progress on the issue. A year ago, it did not look very likely that there will be progress. But here we are on the 2nd of May. We have invited both leaders, President Vučić and Prime Minister Kurti, to Brussels. for the next high-level meeting. It should be their personal meeting number 8, and we will have the association on the agenda. For the first time, we will have the presentation of the draft statute, and this should be followed with a very swift, dynamic process of drafting the statute. So, you know, when there is a political commitment, when there is an understanding that the process is serious, that the international partners are serious, then you can overcome any obstacle. So it's really important we stay focused, and you know, when we get to the point when the statute is agreed, this will already bring us to a new quality in the relations between Kosovo and Serbia.
Mr. McDowell, do you share the view that Kosovo's NATO ambitions are part of the reasons that cause disputes with Serbia?
If the northern regions are, sorry?
The ambition of Kosovo to join the NATO, is it part of the reason why there are still disputes in the region?
Generally, I would say no. I mean, we view the expansion of the alliance as a success story for Europe. It's been the key and chief guarantor of peace and security across the continent since its founding. And we are looking forward to the day when Kosovo can join that alliance. You know, recently it took a step towards joining the Council of Europe. One of the most important factors, in our view, of the agreement that was reached in Ohrid was that it ties the EU accession track independently of each country. Now, Kosovo is not a formal candidate yet, but again, we're looking forward to the time soon when they will be, once they focus on implementing these commitments made into the agreement. So we want to see a general transition. I believe, as Lord Peach mentioned, that the success story of Europe should be one where there's a Euro-Atlantic future that offers greater stability, greater security, greater prosperity for everyone. And this is a vulnerable region with a lot of problems, and they shouldn't be taken lightly, but we have to achieve what is within sight. And right now the focus is, let's get this long-standing dispute about normalization between Serbia and Kosovo resolved. At the same time, of course, we have to make progress on other issues, and just to mention very briefly, advancing Montenegro's candidacy. You know, they recently had a presidential election that seems to be moving things in a good direction. We'll see what happens in parliamentary elections. We need to keep the door open and the path moving along for Albania and North Macedonia, and we expect, you know, the neighborhood to be supportive in those efforts. And of course, Bosnia has very serious problems, very serious issues going on that are a challenge, again, to prosperity and security across the region. So if we can make serious progress and help Serbia and Kosovo pursue aims which they both said they want to achieve, that holds a great potential for the entire region.
Thank you. Lord Peach, do you think that the citizens of Serbia and Kosovo are ready to ready for the normalization of the relations and, of course, the integration to the European Union?
I think they are, but they hear many different noises. And of course, one of the aspects of the war is the amplification of the noise around the misinformation and disinformation, which of course is sometimes skillfully, sometimes clumsily focused in this region. Sometimes conspiracy theories, other times it's accusations, other times, as both the Special Envoy and the State Department have already said, it's an amplification of the past in a misused way. And so there is a role for the media for supporting harmony in the region. The media in the region itself seems to spend a lot of time supporting misharmony in the region. And so I think the information landscape is important and can often create the impression that the citizens do not support it. But in my experience, they do. And I certainly, again, pick out the fact that we need to bring this to life for the next generation and not keep constantly talking about conflict, ethnic division, and the things that the fear of the other creates through this media landscape. And that is a message that we'll continue to repeat.
Mr. Dokos, in the recent voting for Kosovo's application for the Council of Europe, Athens chose neutrality. This raised some tensions with Serbia. Are you worried that this might affect our relation with Serbia?
Well, this has not been a change in Greece's position. And I'm sure that despite any momentary frustration, our Serbian friends do remember that Greece has supported Serbia for the past 30 years, often at a cost for Greece, and in very difficult times for Belgrade. As I mentioned earlier, we still do not recognize Kosovo's independence, and our position is not going to change anytime soon. But we thought that this would be, first of all, a useful message to actually both parties, and also membership of Kosovo to the Council of Europe might prove quite beneficial in helping that country address some of the problems they have in the rule of law issues. Again, we're trying to be as constructive as we can, sending messages to both sides, and I'm confident that this will not be misunderstood by Belgrade.
Mr. Lajčák, what are the next steps for the normalization of the relations between the two parties?
Well, already after the meeting in Ohrid, we started with the preparations. I invited the two chief negotiators to Brussels on the 4th of April, and here we finalized the text of the Declaration on Missing Persons, which is a very important document because it shows that resolving the fate of still missing is an urgent humanitarian issue, and both parties are committed to this. We agreed that we put the association on the agenda of the next high-level meeting. We agreed on the date for the high-level meeting, which I mentioned, 2nd of May. We have established a new body, as stipulated in the agreement, the Joint Monitoring Committee, which will assess the implementation of this document, and we will report to the member states regularly on this process. We have also established a process of making this agreement legally binding, not only between Kosovo and Serbia, but also between Kosovo and the European Union and Serbia and the European Union. So we are in the process of incorporating these commitments into Serbia's Chapter 35 benchmark. So that means implementation or fulfilling of their part of the agreement is also directly linked to Serbia's EU path, and the same for Kosovo through the so-called Special Committee on Normalization, which is the body that monitors Kosovo's contribution to normalization. We will do this review with member states twice a year, and as I said, we will report to member states on a monthly basis, which guarantees that the focus will stay on the implementation, and it's not, as I said, it's not only between them, but also between each of them and the European Union. Now we are, as I said, in a full swing preparing the high-level meeting, where we will have this first discussion about the association, and we'll start drafting. And we also expect this meeting on the 2nd to start not only the implementation of this one particular task, very important, symbolical, the creation of the association/community of Serbia majority municipalities, but also in earnest will start the implementation of other elements of the agreement. And we want this process to be, as I said, dynamic, credible, measurable, visible, and it's important that everyone stays focused. So I have high expectations of this meeting on the 2nd of May, and I also hope that there will be nothing that would prevent this meeting from happening. That means no provocation on the ground or no escalation on the ground. As I said, the chances are still there, but we have a clear commitment from both leaders. They are coming, they know what is on the agenda, and they will come with their positions. And I also should say that, as I said, they met 7 times so far, and each meeting was better than the previous one in terms of atmospherics, in terms of their ability to talk to each other, to listen to each other, to understand each other. Even if they disagreed, it's very respectful, and this in itself is already a very positive thing. So I really hope, and I will knock on the wood, that the meeting of the 2nd of May will continue and will confirm this trend.
Since you mentioned that your concerns about tensions or a climax probably, but my next question to Mr. McDowell would be that if you are concerned that the Russian aggression and the influence in the Western Balkan region may cause tensions or may raise nationalism again in the Balkans, in the heart of Europe.
Absolutely. This is a very real threat. We see evidence of this activity all the time. I believe Lord Peach, mentioned a few examples, where we've seen that. It is definitely ongoing, and we have to work together to close those avenues. If we're talking in disinformation, if we're talking about energy dependence and reliance on Russia, making sure that institutions work, are transparent, that there's accountability, reducing corruption, which unfortunately is also an active avenue across the region for Russian and other malign influence. And it means that the West has to be an active competitor to help create opportunity, especially economic opportunity, across the region.
Thank you. Lord Pitts, I would like to address the same question to you as well. If the UK is worried of the influence of Russia and China, probably in the European continent, but in the region, especially in the region of the Western Balkans.
I mean, I think you can discuss many elements of regional affairs through the lens of the states, but for some of this discussion, you do need, as you suggest, to look across the region. And across the region, there's a tendency to reinforce each other's bad stories. And across the region, there are vulnerabilities as a result of geography and history. And so there isn't a wonderful rail network. There isn't a high-speed transit road network. There aren't good ports that are connected to either networks. And so I think the infrastructure doesn't help, and therefore that creates opportunities for corruption, as my colleagues have said. The way in which ideas and universities work together is a positive, and we must remember the positives, and many of us try and engage with the students whenever we can. The way the think tanks work can be positive as well. But there's this ever-present negative influence. And it sometimes sounds as if we're just over-focused on Russia. But we're over-focused on Russia because Russia is trying to destabilize the whole region with some of the normative behavior that's been going on for hundreds of years, some of it for tens of years, but all of it trying to destabilize or create doubt, to create mistrust, to create those divisions and make them worse. And therefore, we have to counter disinformation, working with friends and allies, working with the countries in the region. And although many other platforms and elements of this conference have discussed cyber information, all the other domains that we now talk about, the reality in this region is that the information environment is very vulnerable. Countries and elements of countries are vulnerable to attack by cyber. Sectors are vulnerable, including the medical sector. And there are plenty of actors who operate not just in what we call the grey zone, but also in the dark web. And the boundaries between criminals and those who profit from crime, they are real in this region, and we shouldn't be shy of saying that. And so we should work with our friends in the region and our allies on countering cyber attacks, countering criminality, working on understanding those links. And also, I'm really serious about this, we need to focus on building up the cooperative infrastructure across the region by which people can benefit through the European Atlantic journey.
Mr. Dokos, can Athens claim a pivotal role in the Western Balkans region? And I'm not talking only about security, but investments, tourism probably.
Well, the last 10 years have been difficult because of the economic crisis, and we lost the position we had in a number of Western Balkan countries. Now, we are making an economic recovery. Some of the opportunities may not be there any longer, but I think Greek companies are making a comeback. But it is a different business atmosphere. I'm sure there are opportunities and Greek private sector, but also a number of other semi-state Greek companies are trying to take advantage of those opportunities. But of course, the competition is fierce with some of the big countries, so it's not easy. But let me say again, the interest is there. For us, if you describe the Eastern Mediterranean as our front yard, the Balkans is our backyard, or vice versa. It is an area of critical interest for Greece. We would like to see a stable Western Balkans being part to the Euro-Atlantic institutions as quickly as possible.
Thank you. Mr. Lajčák, if we try to see the big picture, the big geopolitical picture, if you like, where does the region stand in this picture, in the broader picture?
Well, there is no doubt that the Western Balkans should be fully integrated in the European Union. That's the best for them, that's the best for us. Unfortunately, this is not happening. I mean, the last new member was admitted 10 years ago, and the progress in the accession negotiations is extremely slow. Slow to the extent that the people in the Balkans are questioning whether the European membership is in the cards. It's a reality, it will ever happen. So it was mentioned in the previous panels, and it's the reality that the tragic war in Ukraine, the Russia's aggression against Ukraine, if it had one positive effect, then it was the awakening of the European Union, understanding that the Western Balkans are still in a vulnerable place, and we need to be more serious. And all of a sudden there is much more attention, all of a sudden there are many activities. Last year, if you look at the concrete results, you would say it was a very successful year because Bosnia and Herzegovina got candidate status, North Macedonia, Albania got invitation to start accession negotiations, Kosovo got visa liberalization decision. So you would say this should bring new atmosphere, new energy, but it's not happening. And why? Because everybody knows that this is not the result of a new atmosphere in the region. These are just long overdue decisions on the side of the European Union. So they did not reward any particular progress on the ground. It was like recognition of the fact that this should have happened before. So that means credibility of the European future of the enlargement is the most important element here. And yes, damage was done, but we have this momentum, we have this window of opportunity, and we must turn this momentum into a new quality where we will be believing in each other. That's extremely important. It's also important for the process I am responsible for, because the normalization of relations is linked to the European future, and both Serbia and Kosovo must see that the progress on normalization will also bring them closer to the goal or dream of joining the European Union. If they don't believe in this ultimate goal, there will be much less motivation to make this important and painful decisions that they are making right now. And finally, it's also about the credibility of the European Union. It's about the European Union's ability to influence our inner yard, however we call it, our immediate neighborhood. If we do not succeed in the Balkans, then where else can we succeed? Where else are we seen as credible player? And I also say that there is a need for a new world order. It's clear that the one that allowed Russia to attack Ukraine we will not go back to it. And we want the European Union to be among those who will be drafting this new world order. But if we, 5 years from now or 10 years from now, are still busy dealing with the chapters and clusters and still unable to make a strategic decision about having the Western Balkans as part of our family, then the rest of the world will not wait for us, and then the new rules will be drafted without us being part of it. So that's why it's also in our interest to demonstrate that we are serious and we can deliver.
Mr. McDowell, are you concerned that if the two parties fail to implement the agreement, if tensions rise again, this might have a domino effect in the Western Balkans region and maybe in the rest of Europe?
Well, honestly, we'd rather not contemplate failure. I believe, as the special representative and others have said, this is an opportunity, right, that we're focused on right now, and we're trying to keep both parties also focused on what they need to do in terms of implementation. But I don't think we would be generally so invested in these countries and in the region as we have been. And look, the United States, we may be across the Atlantic, but we remain heavily invested in this region and the future of the region. That commitment has not changed, and it's reflected in the new miles category that they had to invent for my boss, Gabe Escobar, because he's been flying back and forth to Europe so much. But there is always the potential that things can get worse. And when we have influences in the near abroad, when we have Russia looking for opportunities, there's a reason why we all have a stake in what's happening. So yes, we have to think about contingency planning. We have to make sure that we're maintaining our commitments everywhere from right now, making sure these parties are doing each their part. If it's Serbia, Kosovo, to making sure, as the special representative mentioned, that the path to join these families, these communities, remains a credible one where merited progress is recognized. These are all things we have to be working on simultaneously, maintaining credible peacekeeping forces in Europe, where the United States has made contributions right now. The European Union, inherited a serious responsibility from NATO, and that potential for violence, not only between Serbia and Kosovo, but elsewhere in the region, is real. And that's why we have to stay focused and make sure that the progress that needs to be made is being made. Because in the meantime, the young people from the region are leaving. I think as the Special Representative mentioned, they've already lost patience, and we see this. And this is very worrying, very troubling. That's why we have to seize this opportunity, and we're definitely going to do everything we can to support it.
Lord Pitts, you mentioned earlier that it is unfortunate that we still have peacekeeping forces in the region. Do you actually see a near future where these forces can withdraw?
Not today, but we also have to remind ourselves why they're there, which is to sustain a safe and secure environment. The second part of that story, of course, is to build the capacity of local security forces to take over one day, which continues. And it's worth reminding everyone that the one institution of the federal state that works in Bosnia and Herzegovina are the armed forces. And so we need to continue to develop capacity capability in those countries. We need to make sure that the states follow the values that we represent on this panel across the European Union and the Atlantic and through the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. So it is about that blend of working with the governments, working with society, working with the armed forces, working with the police. Second time I've mentioned it and emphasize it, to make sure that they are part of the fabric of the rules of law, the rule of law, and the human rights and values for society. That's the way to persuade the talented young people to stay, to give them that opportunity to participate in a better future, rather than trying to continually, as several of us have said, look over the shoulder to the past. And it's a really serious moment with the way the world is. If we continue to look at the recent conflicts and the former conflicts and the old conflicts and the medieval conflicts, then I don't see how we can give that better future to the people. Therefore, we have to move forwards, not backwards.
Mm-hmm. So as we're running out of time, Mr. Dokos, I would like to give you a couple of minutes for closing remarks and then the rest of the speakers.
Well, what has already been mentioned in this and previous sessions is that we have not a zero-sum game mentality, but a lose-lose situation where both sides seem to be happy to cancel each other's European integration paths. And if for Kosovo there is only one path, Serbia seems to be more ambivalent. And the question is, why is that? Is it only Serbia's fault, or have we done something wrong ourselves, we Europeans? And it seems like there is a widespread impression in a number of Western Balkan countries that the integration process has taken too long. It's becoming too complicated, and as one of my colleagues would say, the goalposts are moving while the play continues. So I think it's time to make not only our self-criticism, but also honor our own commitments. I think multiple messages need to be sent, not only to the two sides, the Serbs and the Kosovars, but also to the EU institutions and especially EU member states, that it's time to move on.
Mr. Lajčák?
I think we are currently in a situation when we have a credible plan for the way forward, which has the potential to deliver what we want to deliver: normalization of relations between Kosovo and Serbia, and normalization of atmosphere and cooperation in the Balkans. It shows that when we are united, determined, and we have a plan, then we can change the situation and the atmosphere. So I only wish to, I wish we stay united and focused. And of course, it will help us a lot if the countries of the Western Balkans will see that the European future is tangible, is credible, and they can speed up the process depending on the results. So I'm sure that it will help to change the atmosphere even further.
Mr. McDowell?
I think, as the other speakers have said, this is a question: where is our focus going to be? Is it going to be looking to the past, revisiting old disagreements, or are we going to look to what we can all do to bring about that common future, to bring it closer? It's not so far away. It's within reach. And for that reason, we're asking all parties to not take unilateral actions which are going to only add to tensions that threaten to derail the progress that's been made. And we're also asking all member states to think about what they can do. That includes those countries which respectfully have chosen not yet to recognize Kosovo's independence. Be ready. Be ready so when we get the progress that we're all aiming to achieve, we can all get behind this and help it move it to the next step. And we really appreciate, by the way, Greece's very constructive approach. And again, we would urge all member states to think about how is it going to make our neighborhood more prosperous, more stable, better for all of us when neighbors can collaborate and have better relationships. And that includes bringing them into this common future, this family together.
And Lord Pitts?
Well, of course, as we look at this, the consequence of the war in Ukraine, the consequence of the cost of living crisis, the energy crisis, all the other crises, there's a human tendency to look inwards. But as Mr. Lajčák says very clearly, and Angelina said in the previous panel, we must not do that. We've got to look for the greater good, the common benefit. We know who is trying to knock us off course. We know who's trying to destabilize us. We know what happened in the past. We need to work together now for a better future. And we need to do so constructively and urgently. Now is the time.
Thank you very much. I hope we gained some perspective. We had some conclusions, fruitful conclusions. I would like to thank you for being here with us. Thank you very much. This is the end of this session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.